Yeah, actually I have both. Dan, very quick question. Is your student working at the SMSA level?
I think Roxanne's thesis was based on the SMSA level analysis as opposed to the zip code level analysis.
I strongly urge you to look at the local level. SO2 and CO are local pollutants. Looking at them over on multi-counties is doomed to failure right from the beginning. It's a waste of time. It's amazing, given that SO2 showed as strongly as it did, as Suresh pointed out. And in one of my slides this afternoon, I will show you how we have determined that SO2 is highly correlated with elemental carbon when you look at the whole country, and it's likely coming from traffic or perhaps from heating sources. So maybe it's not so strange, but the scale is important. That's point number one. On torturing the data, you haven't waterboarded it yet. There are two variables I can tell you about that we have in the veteran study, both of which are highly significant. One is latitude, which we represent by degree days. You've probably been reading in the paper about vitamin D being important these days. That's a latitude phenomenon. So especially in California, with respect to Michael Jerrett's study, when you're contrasting Northern California with Southern California, you need that variable. It's highly important in the veterans. And the other one I'm not so sure is important, but we threw it in because we had it, and that's individual height, which, as you know, is a predictor of lung function. That's also very important. So we've got more torturing to do. There were two instances today of the veterans study appearing on a slide, which I'm grateful for. I mean, that just doesn't happen very often. And but it's not appearing correctly. The quote is correct. There is a paper that looked at two periods, 1989 and later, but there are 3 or 4 other papers that looked at the whole period from 1976 to 2001, in which PM2.5 is strongly negative. It's significantly negative in some cases. It depends on which data you use. But in our first paper, we used the same data that Arden did because he got it from me. And so that was a nice comparison. The reason it's negative is because sulfate is negative. And we have been asking ourselves, why do our veterans thrive in high sulfate communities in the Northeast? Well, they do. And I don't know why. But to characterize the veteran study as supporting PM2.5 as a cause of mortality is incorrect. Finally, on the question of all causes, and Michael, I appreciate what you've done. You've shown the way to a lot of us on many of these analyses, but I have to disagree with what I've perceived as not being blind to the source of funding. What I heard you say, and I hope you'll tell me it's wrong, that when you got a negative result, you said, well, we have to find out what's wrong with this. You didn't say that about the positive result. And that's something that I find inappropriate. Why would you think finding something negative is more out of line than finding some large positive result? You have to look at everything as carefully as you can, and when I see results as in the Austria study, which I don't know much about, which seems to imply, and I think some of yours do too, that air pollution is just as harmful as smoking, I have a lot of problems with that. So those of us who were working with industrial money are acutely aware of this problem. When we find a sulfate result or an SO2 result or vanadium or nickel, we report it, even though some of our funding is coming from people that emit those pollutants. So I think people who take government money have an equal opportunity and equal responsibility to look at the high spots as well as the low spots. End of sermon. Thank you.
Well, we looked equally hard at negative and positive findings. I didn't mean to infer that because this was negative we were going to give it some extra level of scrutiny, but it was puzzling to us why, when we were seeing causes of death that account for about half the total deaths having such significantly elevated rates, why we would not see that reflected in all-cause mortality. So it had nothing to do with it being a negative result, and I think the fact that I've shown it here today, even in a preliminary form, is suggestive that I'm going to always present the results that I have as honestly as possible, and you're going to get the negative and the positive ones as well. regardless of funding source.
Yeah, I'm very happy to hear that, but it's not, yours is not the only one that's done that. In the literature, there are other examples where all cause is essentially nil and some cause is high. What you hear about is the high cause, and what you don't hear about is the negative that's lurking out there somewhere that has to be there in order to make the all cause come out as low as it does. So, yeah, we all know that cause of death data is not very good, especially in older people. And I think this is a philosophical point that we all need to wrestle with.